I'm Andre, 35, a single dad, raising two amazing kids in suburban California since my wife walked out 4 years ago. Between my IT job and parenting, I've created a loving, if chaotic, home for Mason and Emma. Then my perfect sister Natalie dropped the bombshell my children weren't invited to my niece's birthday party because they're bad influences who might ruin her perfect day. Before I share how this family drama unfolded, where are you watching from? Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever dealt with family members who think they're better than everyone else. Growing up, Natalie and I were like night and day. She was always the perfect child straight, as violin lessons, pristine bedroom, and never a hair out of place. I was the free spirit, more interested in taking apart computers and exploring the woods behind our house than following rules. Our parents never explicitly favored her, but there was always an undercurrent of why can't you be more like your sister in my childhood. That dynamic continued into adulthood. While I pursued my passion for technology and landed a solid but modest IT job at a mid-sized company, Natalie married Richard, a successful investment banker, who whisked her away to a 6,000-square-foot mansion in the Oaks, the most exclusive neighborhood in our city. Their house has a swimming pool with a waterfall feature, a home theater, and a wine cellar stocked with bottles that cost more than my monthly rent. Meanwhile, I live in a comfortable but ordinary 3-bedroom ranch house in a middle-class neighborhood with decent schools. My life took an unexpected turn 4 years ago when my ex-wife Stephanie announced she'd fallen in love with a French photographer she met at a conference. Within 3 weeks, she had packed her bags and moved to Europe, leaving me to raise Mason and Emma, who were 6 and 4 at the time. The divorce papers arrived via courier a month later, with Stephanie generously allowing me full custody since her new life apparently didn't have room for children. Those first months were the hardest of my life. I'd stumble through mornings trying to get 2 heartbroken kids fed, dressed, and off to school before racing to work. Evenings were a blur of homework, help, dinner prep, bath time, and tearful questions about when mommy was coming home. I maxed out credit cards, paying for emergency childcare and takeout food because I simply couldn't manage everything. Mason took his mother's abandonment especially hard. He's always been sensitive and introspective, with an artistic streak that manifests in elaborate drawings and stories. After Stephanie left, he became even more withdrawn, creating fantasy worlds in his sketchbook rather than engaging with the painful reality. His teachers reported that he sometimes struggled to focus in class, lost in his own thoughts or doodling in the margins of his worksheets instead of completing assignments. Emma responded differently. My fierce little girl became even more outspoken and energetic, as if determined to fill the space her mother left with noise and movement. She stands up for herself and others, with a confidence that's admirable, but can sometimes come across as defiance to adults, expecting quiet compliance from children, especially little girls. When a boy in her class pulled her ponytail, Emma didn't wait for teacher intervention. She told him exactly why that wasn't acceptable and refused to play with him until he apologized properly. Natalie has always approached motherhood like everything else in her life, with meticulous planning and an emphasis on appearances. Isabella's life is a carefully orchestrated schedule of ballet, piano lessons, language tutoring, and supervised playdates with children from similarly affluent families. My niece always appears immaculately groomed, even at family gatherings where my kids might show up with mismatched socks or syrup stains from breakfast. The contrast in our parenting styles became apparent at the first holiday dinner after Stephanie left. I was just proud that we'd made it there with both kids dressed and relatively clean, but Natalie spent the evening making little comments about Mason's untrimmed hair and Emma's tendency to interrupt adult conversations. When Emma knocked over her water glass, Natalie sighed dramatically and said, "This is why we always use plastic cups for the children at our house." Last Thanksgiving was particularly tense. Natalie hosted in her formal dining room with fine china and crystal glassware. When Mason accidentally used his salad fork for the main course, Natalie corrected him in front of everyone. Later, she pulled me aside and suggested that perhaps I should invest in some etiquette lessons for my children, as proper manners would serve them well despite their circumstances. I bit my tongue for the sake of family harmony, but it took all my willpower. My parents, Robert and Margaret, retired to Florida 2 years ago, and do their best to remain neutral in the ongoing tension between their children. Dad calls weekly to check on us, and Mom sends care packages with homemade cookies and hand-knitted sweaters for the kids. They've gently suggested that Natalie could be more understanding of our situation, but they've never directly confronted her about her treatment of us. I understand their reluctance to choose sides between their children, but sometimes I wish they would acknowledge how hurtful Natalie's behavior can be. Despite the challenges and Natalie's judgment, I've worked hard to create a loving home for Mason and Emma. We might not have the fanciest house or the most structured routine, but we have movie nights with popcorn fights, backyard camping adventures, and honest conversations about feelings. I've learned to French braid Emma's hair and help Mason craft elaborate dioramas for school projects. We're not perfect, but we're a team. I've always tried to maintain family relationships despite our differences, especially for the children's sake. Mason, Emma, and Isabella are cousins after all, and should have the chance to build bonds that might last long after their parents are gone. That's why, despite everything, I continued accepting invitations to Natalie's perfectly orchestrated holiday gatherings and made sure to include Isabella in our more casual celebrations. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, a thick, cream-colored envelope addressed in professional calligraphy. Inside was an elaborately designed card announcing Isabella's Princess and Knight's Enchanted 10th birthday celebration, complete with a wax seal and a small sachet of glitter that spilled onto my kitchen counter. The party promised a royal feast, a live unicorn photo experience, medieval games, and a professional storyteller, all happening at Natalie and Richard's estate in 3 weeks' time. I called the kids over to see the invitation, knowing they would be excited about seeing their cousin. Despite the differences between our families, Mason and Emma genuinely love Isabella. When they have the rare opportunity to play together away from Natalie's watchful eye, the three of them get along wonderfully. At our family's 4th of July picnic last year, I caught them building an elaborate fairy house out of sticks and leaves in my parents' backyard. Isabella's designer sandals discarded as she happily dug in the dirt alongside. Her cousins. A unicorn for real. Emma's eyes widened as she read the invitation details. Well, probably a pony with a horn attached, I explained, but still pretty cool. Can I wear my dinosaur costume instead of a night outfit? Mason asked, already thinking about how he could adapt to the theme in his own unique way. I laughed. We'll figure something out, buddy. That evening, after the kids were in bed, my phone rang. Natalie's name flashed on the screen, and I assumed she was calling to check whether we'd received the invitation. Hey Nat, we got Isabella's party invitation today. The kids are really excited about the unicorn. There was a slight pause before she responded, her voice taking on the overly controlled tone I recognized from previous difficult conversations. About that, Andre. That's actually why I'm calling. I wanted to discuss the invitation with you directly. Something in her voice made me sit down at the kitchen table. Richard and I have given this a lot of thought, she continued, and while we'd love for you to attend the celebration, we think it's best if Mason and Emma sit this one out. The words hung in the air as I struggled to process what she was saying. What do you mean, sit this one out? They're Isabella's cousins. I understand that, and it was a difficult decision, Natalie said, though her tone suggested it hadn't been difficult at all. But this is a very special day that we've been planning for months. We've hired professional photographers and videographers to capture everything, and the guest list is very carefully curated. Carefully curated. They're children, Natalie, not museum exhibits. She sighed, the sound crackling through the phone speaker. This is exactly why we're having this conversation. Your defensive attitude doesn't help. If you must know, Mason and Emma's behavior at family gatherings has been concerning. Concerning? What are you talking about? Well, for starters, Emma speaks out of turn constantly. At Christmas dinner, she interrupted Richard's colleague 3 times during one conversation. And Mason, I'm sorry, but he's just so unpredictable. Remember when he broke that crystal vase in our foyer? That was an accident, and he apologized immediately. I countered, feeling heat rise in my chest. He even offered to use his allowance to replace it. It's not about the vase, Andre. It's about the pattern of behavior. Your children are high energy and undisciplined. This party is very important to Isabella, and to us. There will be several influential families attending, including Richard's managing director and his wife. The true reason for the exclusion was becoming clear. My children didn't fit the image Natalie wanted to project to her wealthy friends and her husband's colleagues. They weren't accessories that complemented her perfectly designed life. So this isn't about Isabella at all. This is about you showing off to Richard's bosses. That's unfair, Natalie snapped. Isabella specifically requested a sophisticated party this year. She's growing up, and her interests are maturing. She wants an event that feels special and elevated. Did Isabella specifically ask for her cousins not to be invited? I challenged, because the last time they were together, they were inseparable. There was another telling pause. Children don't always understand social dynamics and expectations. As parents, we sometimes need to make difficult decisions for them. We went back and forth for another 20 minutes, with Natalie citing increasingly minor incidents as evidence of my children's unsuitability for her daughter's celebration. By the end of the call, it was clear that her decision was final. Mason and Emma were not welcome at Isabella's party, though I was still expected to attend, presumably to deliver a suitably expensive gift. The hardest part was explaining the situation to my children. I waited until the next evening, wanting time to process my own anger before trying to frame the exclusion in a way that wouldn't damage their self-esteem. "Hey guys, we need to talk about Isabella's party," I began, as we sat at the dinner table. Mason looked up from his spaghetti. "I've been thinking about what to get her. Maybe one of those jewelry-making kits. She said she liked the bracelet I made at camp." The thoughtfulness behind his suggestion made what I had to say even more difficult. "That's a really nice idea, buddy. But I actually got a call from Aunt Natalie yesterday. The party is going to be a bit different than we thought. It's going to be more of a grown-up event." Emma's fork clattered against her plate. But the invitation said princesses and knights. That's not grown-up stuff. I took a deep breath. I know, and I'm sure there will be fun activities. But Aunt Natalie explained that this party is going to have a lot of her and Uncle Richard's friends there, and it's going to be very formal. She thinks it might not be much fun for kids your age. "But Isabella's our age," Mason pointed out quietly, his brow furrowed in confusion. "You're right, and Isabella will be there, of course. But the party is specially planned around what she likes." The explanation sounded weak even to my own ears. "So we're not invited?" Emma asked directly, her lower lip beginning to tremble. "But we're family. Isabella's our cousin." "I'm still going to go and represent our family," I said, hating every word. "And we'll plan something special to do together that weekend instead." "Did we do something wrong?" Mason asked, his voice so small it nearly broke me. "Is Isabella mad at us?" "Absolutely not," I said, firmly reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "This isn't about anything you did, and it's not Isabella's choice. Sometimes adults make complicated decisions that don't make sense. This is one of those times." But as I looked at Mason's downcast eyes and Emma's barely contained tears, I knew that no explanation could prevent the rejection from hurting them. My sister had deemed my children unworthy of inclusion in a family celebration, and they were old enough to understand exactly what that meant. Sleep evaded me that night. I tossed and turned, replaying the conversation with Natalie and seeing the hurt in my children's eyes. Around 3 a.m, I gave up and went to the kitchen to make some tea, only to find Mason sitting at the table with his sketchbook. "Hey buddy, can't sleep?" I asked, keeping my voice low so we wouldn't wake Emma. He shrugged, continuing to draw what looked like a castle with a high wall around it. "I'm just working on some ideas." I sat beside him and gently turned the sketchbook so I could see better. The drawing showed a castle on a hill with 3 small figures outside a gate where a guard stood. It didn't take a psychologist to interpret the symbolism. "Want to talk about it?" I offered. Mason set down his pencil. "Why doesn't Aunt Natalie like us?" The directness of his question caught me off guard. I'd been prepared for sadness about missing a fun event, not this fundamental questioning of family acceptance. "It's not that she doesn't like you," I started, then stopped myself. I'd always tried to be truthful with my children while protecting them from unnecessary hurt. This situation required careful balance. Aunt Natalie has very specific ideas about how things should be, including how children should behave. Those ideas aren't about you personally, they're about her own expectations. But we're not bad kids, right? His voice carried a note of genuine uncertainty that pierced my heart. Not even close, I assured him, pulling him into a hug. You and Emma are amazing, creative, kind children. I'm proud of you every single day. The next morning, I called my friend Jason to meet for coffee during my lunch break. Jason and I had been friends since college, and he'd been a crucial support during the divorce and aftermath. She did what Jason nearly spilled his coffee when I explained the situation. That's beyond cold, man. That's Arctic. Tell me about it, I sighed, rubbing my temples. The worst part is seeing how it's affecting the kids. Mason's questioning whether they're bad now. Jason shook his head. That's messed up. You know what I think. Screw her party. Do something amazing with your kids that day instead. Like what I can't compete with unicorns and professional medieval entertainers. Who says you have to compete? Just do something meaningful that shows your kids they matter. Back at work that afternoon, I was still mulling over Jason's suggestion when my coworker Darren stopped by my desk. Hey Andre, quick question, you have kids, right? Around 10 or so. Yeah, Mason's 10 and Emma's 8. Why? Darren pulled out an envelope and slid it across my desk. My sister got these Disneyland tickets for her family, but her husband just got called away for a work emergency that weekend. She was wondering if you might want to buy them at a discount, rather than letting them go to waste. 2 adults, 2 kids, all access passes. I opened the envelope and checked the date. The tickets were for the exact day of Isabella's party. It felt like the universe was sending me a sign. I quickly calculated what was in my savings account. I'd been putting away a little each month for a rainy day. This wasn't exactly what I'd planned to use it for, but seeing my children's wounded expressions the night before made the decision easy. How much does she want for them? The tickets weren't cheap even at a discount, but they were worth every penny. That evening I started researching how to make the most of a day at Disneyland. Best rides for their ages, character meeting opportunities, parade times, and special experiences. I created a folder on my laptop labeled Operation Magic Day and filled it with maps, schedules, and tips from Disney blogs. As I planned, I wrestled with whether to tell Natalie that we wouldn't be attending her party at all. The polite thing would be to let her know in advance, but part of me, the part still stinging from her casual rejection of my children, was tempted to just not show up. My parents called that weekend for their usual check-in, and I ended up telling them about the situation. Oh, honey, my mother sighed. I don't understand why Natalie would do something like that. Those children adore each other. Your sister has always been particular, my father added, choosing his words carefully. But this crosses a line. So you think I'm justified in skipping the party entirely? I asked, seeking their validation. There was a pause before my mother responded. We understand why you'd want to, Andre, and we support whatever decision you make. But what? But taking the high road might be better in the long run, she suggested gently. Not for Natalie's sake, but for Isabella's and for family peace. After mulling over my parents' advice, I decided on a compromise. I would make a brief appearance at the beginning of the party, deliver Isabella's gift, and then leave to take my kids to Disneyland. It wasn't ideal. I'd have to drive back from Natalie's neighborhood to pick up the kids, then hit the highway to Anaheim, but it felt like the right balance between family obligation and standing up for my children. For Isabella's gift, I bypassed the designer boutiques Natalie had subtly suggested, and instead found something I knew would mean more to my niece. At our last family gathering, Isabella had admired the friendship bracelet Mason made at summer camp, asking him in a whisper when Natalie wasn't listening if he could teach her how to make one someday. I found a high-quality jewelry-making kit with semi-precious stones and silver findings, along with a beginner's guide to creating meaningful friendship symbols. It was still expensive enough to pass Natalie's materialistic inspection, but it honored the connection between the cousins. With the Disneyland plan in place, I decided to keep it a secret from Mason and Emma until the morning of the party. Their disappointment had been so profound that I wanted to give them a pure moment of joy when they discovered where we were actually going instead of dwelling on the rejection for weeks beforehand. The week leading up to Isabella's party was harder than I anticipated. Mason became increasingly withdrawn, spending more time in his room with his sketchbooks and less time engaging in conversation at dinner. Emma, normally my chatterbox, grew uncharacteristically quiet and had 2 nightmares where she woke up crying. At Mason's parent-teacher conference that Thursday, his teacher, Mrs. Bennett, mentioned the change in his demeanor. Mason has always been thoughtful, and sometimes in his own world, she explained. But this week he's been especially distant. During free drawing time, he's created several pictures that caught my attention. She showed me a folder containing Mason's recent artwork. Most were variations on the same theme, family scenes with distinct groupings. In one, 3 figures, clearly Mason, Emma, and me, stood on one side of a high wall, while another group, recognizably Natalie, Richard, and Isabella, stood on the other. In another, a small figure sat alone, while others attended what looked like a party in the background. "Is everything okay at home?" Mrs. Bennett asked with genuine concern. I briefly explained the situation with Isabella's party, trying to be fair despite my anger at Natalie. Mrs. Bennett nodded thoughtfully. Rejection is particularly difficult for children Mason's age. Their social awareness is developing rapidly, and exclusion can feel deeply personal, especially when it comes from family. That afternoon, I took both kids to see Dr. Mitchell, the family therapist who had helped us process their mother's departure. I hadn't scheduled an appointment in months, but he agreed to see us on short notice. Rejection from family members can be particularly confusing for children. Dr. Mitchell explained after I described the situation while the kids were in the waiting room looking at books. Unlike peer rejection, which children are somewhat prepared to navigate, family is supposed to be the safe space where acceptance is unconditional. "How do I help them process this without bad-mouthing their aunt?" I asked. "Focus on affirming their worth and belonging within your immediate family unit," he advised. "And, if possible, create positive experiences that overshadow the rejection. The brain tends to fixate on negative social experiences. As a survival mechanism, we can counteract that by deliberately creating powerful, positive memories." My conversation with Dr. Mitchell reinforced that the Disneyland surprise was the right approach, not just as a distraction, but as a healing experience. That evening, Natalie called with last-minute details about the party. "The valet service starts at 1 o'clock, she informed me, as if I were attending a gala rather than a child's birthday. But immediate family should arrive by 12:30 to be in position for the grand entrance. Isabella will be coming down the main staircase at 1 when the first guests arrive." "I'll be there," I said simply. "Wonderful. Oh, and I wanted to check what you're wearing. We're going for a sophisticated medieval aesthetic, think Game of Thrones but family-friendly. Nothing too costumey but elegant with period touches." I bit back a sarcastic response. "I'll find something appropriate." "Perfect. And Andre?" Her voice took on a softer tone that I recognized as her attempt at sisterly concern. "How are Mason and Emma taking the news about the party? I hope you explained it to them gently." The audacity of her question after excluding them made my blood boil, but I kept my voice level. "They're disappointed, of course. They love their cousin." "I'm sure they do," Natalie said smoothly. "And we'll have to arrange a more suitable get-together soon. Perhaps a casual backyard thing at your place. That would be more their speed." The condescension in her voice was unmistakable. In Natalie's world, my children were only worthy of casual backyard things, not the elegant social events she orchestrated. "We'll see," I replied noncommittally. "I should go now. Emma needs help with homework." After hanging up, I focused on preparations for our Disneyland adventure. I secretly packed a bag with sunscreen, water bottles, comfortable walking shoes for everyone, and light jackets for the evening when temperatures might drop. I printed our tickets and fast passes, studied the park map, to create an efficient route between attractions, and arranged to take the day off work. That night, Emma crawled into my bed around midnight, her cheeks damp with tears. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked, though I had a pretty good idea. "Is there something wrong with me and Mason?" she asked in a small voice. "Is that why Isabella doesn't want us at her party?" I pulled her close. "Absolutely not. There is nothing wrong with either of you." "Then why can't we go? We're family." I chose my words carefully. Sometimes adults make decisions based on their own issues, not because of anything children have done. This is one of those times. But Aunt Natalie told Mommy on the phone that we're undisciplined and not properly socialized. I heard her when we were at their house for Easter. I was shocked both that Natalie would say such things and that Emma had overheard. Your Aunt Natalie has very specific ideas about how children should behave. But those are just her opinions, and they're not facts. Different families have different rules and values. So we're not bad. Not even a little bit, I assured her, hugging her tightly. You and Mason are incredible kids. You're kind, creative, smart, and brave. I'm proud of you every single day. After Emma finally drifted back to sleep, I checked social media and saw that Natalie had posted photos of the party preparations. Her elaborate medieval-themed decorations filled their grand foyer and backyard with Instagram-perfect floral arrangements and custom-painted backdrops. She had tagged several local celebrities who would apparently be attending, as well as the catering company, event planner, and photographer, all with impressive pedigrees and price tags to match. Looking at the extravagance through the blue light of my phone screen, I felt more certain than ever about our Disneyland plan. While Natalie created her picture-perfect social media moment, we would be creating genuine family memories. The next morning, I had to pretend to get ready for the party while keeping our true destination secret. The kids watched me with confusion as I dressed in a button-up shirt and slacks. "Why do you have to dress up if it's a princess and knights party?" Emma asked, perched on my bed as I tied my tie. "Aunt Natalie has specific expectations," I explained. "But don't worry, I won't be gone long." "Are you bringing Isabella our present?" Mason asked from the doorway. "Yes, I've got it wrapped and ready." "Will you tell her we miss her?" His question carried a vulnerability that nearly broke my composure. "Absolutely," I promised, making a mental note to have a private moment with my niece if possible. Natalie and Richard's estate was transformed when I arrived at 12:30 sharp. The circular driveway was lined with torch-style lanterns, and young men in medieval-inspired livery were ready to park guests' cars. A red carpet led from the driveway to the front door, where a photographer was setting up equipment to capture each arrival. Inside, the transformation was even more elaborate. The foyer ceiling was draped with fabric to resemble a castle interior, and banners bearing custom-designed family crests hung from the walls. Professional actors dressed as knights and court jesters mingled in the great room, while uniformed servers carried trays of themed appetizers and royal goblets of sparkling beverages. Natalie spotted me from across the room and glided over resplendent in a deep purple gown with flowing sleeves that somehow managed to look both medieval and designer chic. "Andre, you made it." She air-kissed both my cheeks. "Richard, look who's here." My brother-in-law approached, dressed in an expensive-looking doublet and breeches that had definitely been tailored specifically for this occasion. "Andre, good to see you. Where should we tell the photographer to send your family's portrait?" The question highlighted the awkwardness of my solo appearance, and I saw Natalie shoot Richard a warning glance. "I'm just representing the family today," I replied smoothly. "Mason and Emma send their love to Isabella." Before either could respond, one of Natalie's friends approached a perfectly coiffed woman in a green gown who I recognized from previous gatherings. "Natalie, the unicorn handler needs to know where to set up the photo station." She paused, noticing me. "Oh, hello again. Andre, right. Where are your adorable children today?" Natalie jumped in before I could answer. "Mason and Emma couldn't make it, unfortunately. Andre's here representing the family." "Such a shame," the woman Karen, I now remembered, commented. "Isabella must be disappointed. She talks about her cousins all the time during our girls' playdates." This revelation earned another sharp glance from Natalie. "Does she? How sweet. Isabella, of course, has so many friends. Speaking of which, is Lily excited about the professional face painter? She does the royal courts in Europe, you know." As Natalie steered Karen away, I found myself cornered by Richard, who lowered his voice conspiratorially. "Between us, I think Natalie made the right call about today. This crowd is a bit particular." He gestured around at the gathering guests, many of whom I recognized as executives from his firm. The Phillips son had a meltdown at their holiday gala, and they haven't been invited to anything since. Social currency is real in these circles. "Is that what this is about?" "Social currency." I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. Richard had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. It's just how things work at this level. You understand. We have to be strategic. About children's birthday parties. About everything, Andre. You should be grateful that you're included in these circles at all. Most people in your situation wouldn't have these kinds of connections. Before I could respond to this remarkably condescending statement, a small voice called my name, and I turned to see Isabella running toward me, her custom-made princess gown billowing behind her. Uncle Andre. She wrapped her arms around my waist. You came. Where are Mason and Emma? I saved special seats for them at my table. Her genuine disappointment was confirmation of what I'd suspected. This exclusion had been entirely Natalie's decision, not Isabella's. They couldn't make it today, sweetheart, but they sent this present and lots of love. I handed her the carefully wrapped package. They miss you very much. Isabella's face fell, but I wanted to show them the unicorn, and the magician is going to make a real bird appear. I told Mom I wanted them here. Richard cleared his throat. Isabella, remember what we discussed about today's special guests. The seating arrangements have been carefully planned. He glanced at me apologetically before leading Isabella away to greet other arriving guests. As I watched them go, I overheard Natalie speaking to her friend group, which had expanded to include 2 more elegantly dressed women. Such a relief. Honestly, Natalie was saying in a hushed but carrying tone. Can you imagine Mason's reaction to the crystal punch bowl? And Emma would probably interrogate the unicorn handler about animal rights, or something equally inappropriate. Some children just aren't raised with proper boundaries. It must be so difficult for you, one of her friends sympathized. Family obligations can be so challenging. Well, we do what we can. Natalie sighed dramatically. It's not Andre's fault, really. Single fatherhood is beyond difficult, especially with their mother completely out of the picture. We try to include them when it's appropriate. I stood frozen, a medieval-themed hors d'oeuvre halfway to my mouth, as my sister effectively disparaged my children and my parenting to her social circle. The food turned to ash on my tongue. The final straw came 30 minutes later, when Natalie gathered everyone in the great room for a welcome speech. Standing on a small platform beside a towering birthday cake, shaped like a castle, she raised a glass. Richard and I are so grateful to everyone who has joined us for Isabella's special day. Family is everything to us. She paused to make meaningful eye contact with Richard's boss, and we believe in creating perfect family moments that will become cherished memories. Today represents the culmination of our parenting philosophy that children deserve beauty structure and refined experiences to shape them into the leaders of tomorrow. The implied contrast with my parenting approach was unmistakable. As the guests applauded, I quietly set down my drink, found Isabella to give her a quick goodbye hug, and headed for the door. Natalie intercepted me in the grand hallway. Andre, where are you going? We haven't even cut the cake. There's a whole medieval court presentation planned. I've seen enough, Natalie. I'm leaving. Don't be dramatic, she hissed, glancing back to make sure none of her guests could overhear. This is Isabella's special day. Is it I challenged? Because it seems like it's more about you showing off to Richard's colleagues and your socialite friends. Her face flushed. That is completely unfair. Everything I do is for Isabella's benefit, including separating her from her cousins who she loves and who love her. I heard her, Nat. She wanted Mason and Emma here. You made this decision, not her. You don't understand the social dynamics at play, she insisted. Isabella needs to forge the right connections from an early age. Her future depends on it. She's 10 years old. Her future depends on being loved and accepted for who she is, not on whether the right executive's kid came to her birthday party. Natalie's expression hardened. This is exactly why Mason and Emma weren't invited. This attitude that rules and social norms don't matter. You're raising them in this chaotic environment with no structure, no discipline. No, I'm raising them to be kind, authentic human beings who value people over appearances. And right now, I'm going to go be with my children, instead of standing here listening to you justify treating them like they're not good enough for your perfect life. You're just jealous. Natalie snapped her composure, finally cracking. You've always resented my success, my marriage, my beautiful home. Keep telling yourself that I said opening the front door. Enjoy your perfect party. The drive home from Natalie's estate was a blur of emotions, anger at her elitism, hurt on behalf of my children, and lingering shock at how openly she had disparaged our family. But as I pulled into my driveway, I made a conscious decision to set those feelings aside. Today wasn't about Natalie anymore. It was about showing Mason and Emma that they were valued, loved, and worthy of wonderful experiences. They were waiting in the living room with Mrs. Perez, our elderly neighbor who often helped with childcare. Both looked surprised to see me home so early. "Dad, what happened to the party?" Mason asked, putting down his book. "Change of plans," I announced with a grin I couldn't contain. "I'm thinking we should do something else today. Something more fun than sitting around here." Emma eyed me suspiciously. "Like what?" "Well," I said slowly, pulling the Disneyland tickets from my pocket, "how does this sound?" Their reactions were everything I'd hoped for. Mason's jaw literally dropped, while Emma's scream of delight probably reached the neighbors 3 houses down. They danced around the living room, peppering me with questions about rides and characters and cotton candy. "Is this for real? We're really going." Today Mason kept asking, as if afraid the tickets might disappear if he blinked. 100%. For real, I assured him. "But we need to leave in the next 20 minutes, if we want to make the most of the day. Think you can get ready that fast?" They were dressed and ready in 12 minutes flat, a new household record. Emma had changed shirts 3 times before settling on her favorite sparkly unicorn tee, and Mason had carefully packed his autograph book from our previous trip 2 years ago, hoping to add new character signatures to his collection. The drive to Anaheim was filled with excited chatter as I outlined the day I'd planned. We'd hit their favorite rides first, meet some characters, watch the afternoon parade, have dinner at a themed restaurant, and stay for the evening. Fireworks spectacular. I'd researched wait times and crowd patterns to maximize our experience, and the kids were thrilled by the level of detail in my planning. "This is going to be the best day ever," Emma declared from the back seat, her earlier sadness completely forgotten. Mason was quieter but equally excited. "Did you plan this because we couldn't go to Isabella's party?" he asked perceptively. I considered how to answer. Partly, I admitted. When people make choices that hurt us, we have 2 options. We can dwell on the hurt, or we can create our own joy. Today is about creating joy. His smile told me I'd said the right thing. The moment we walked through the Disneyland gates, the magic took over. The familiar music, the scent of fresh popcorn, the distant sound of a steam train whistle, it all combined to create an atmosphere of pure possibility. I watched my children's faces as they took it all in, their eyes wide with wonder and anticipation. Our first stop was Space Mountain, Mason's absolute favorite. The wait was substantial, but it flew by as we played I Spy and made up stories about the other people in line. When we finally boarded the ride and plunged into the star-filled darkness, Emma's screams of delight and Mason's breathless laughter were worth every penny of the ticket price. From there we made our way to Fantasyland, where Emma was determined to ride the teacups until she was dizzy. She took control of the spinning wheel in the center of our cup, turning it with surprising strength for an 8-year-old, while Mason and I held on for dear life, all of us laughing so hard we could barely breathe. In Frontierland, we panned for gold, actually pyrite, but the kids didn't care, with Mason showing uncharacteristic patience as he sifted through the sand to find the glittering specks. When the attendant presented him with a small vial for his discoveries, the pride on his face was palpable. "Dad, look, I found 8 pieces," he exclaimed, holding the vial up to the sunlight. "That's more than anyone else had." "You've got a real talent there," I told him, ruffling his hair. "Maybe you should be a geologist when you grow up." Maybe, he agreed thoughtfully. Or maybe an artist who also finds gold sometimes. The character meet and greets were Emma's highlight. She approached each princess and superhero with absolute confidence, asking them detailed questions about their lives and adventures. When she met Elsa from Frozen, she launched into a discussion about the responsibilities of having magical powers that had the character actress working overtime to keep up with her philosophical inquiries. "You have to be really careful with ice powers," Emma informed Elsa seriously, "because you could freeze someone's heart by accident if you're having a bad day, and that would be really sad for everyone. I watched from a few feet away, struck by how different this Emma was from the tearful child who had crawled into my bed wondering if there was something wrong with her. Here in this magical space where imagination and joy were the currencies that mattered, my children were thriving. We took a break midday for lunch at a New Orleans-themed restaurant where Mason tried gumbo for the first time. It's spicy, but in a good way, and Emma charmed our server into bringing extra powdered sugar for her beignets. Sitting there watching them eat, their faces flushed with excitement and dusted with sugar, I felt a surge of pure contentment. The afternoon parade was a spectacle of color, music, and beloved characters. We had secured a prime viewing spot, and both kids waved enthusiastically as each float passed. When Mickey Mouse pointed directly at Mason, my son's face lit up with a joy so pure it brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Between attractions, I captured dozens of photos. Mason examining a detailed model of the Millennium Falcon with intense concentration. Emma with her arms thrown wide beneath the soaring spires of Sleeping Beauty Castle, both of them wearing Mickey ears and sticky-faced from cotton candy. These weren't staged shots for social media approval. They were genuine moments of happiness that I wanted to preserve. As the day progressed, I noticed subtle shifts in both children. Mason, who had been so withdrawn in recent days, became increasingly animated, pointing out architectural details in the park's design and striking up conversations with other children in line. Emma's natural exuberance, which Natalie had labeled as inappropriate and undisciplined, was perfectly at home here, where enthusiasm was celebrated rather than suppressed. By late afternoon, we'd hit most of the major attractions and were taking a second round on favorites. As we exited the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, Emma looked up at me with sudden seriousness. "Dad, is this costing a lot of money?" The question caught me off guard. Well, it's a special treat for sure, but some things are worth spending money on. She nodded thoughtfully. "I think it's better than Isabella's party, because we're together." "Me too, sweetheart." The evening brought the spectacular fireworks show with music and projections transforming the castle into a canvas of color and light. We found a spot on a grassy area, and the kids sat in front of me, their faces tilted skyward in anticipation. When the first burst of color exploded against the darkening sky, Emma gasped and reached for Mason's hand. I snapped a photo of them like that, silhouetted against the illuminated castle, hand in hand, united in wonder. Without thinking, I posted it to my rarely used Instagram account with a simple caption, "Perfect day with my perfect people. Blessed Disneyland." It wasn't meant as a statement to Natalie or anyone else. It was simply a moment of gratitude that I wanted to express. But as we walked toward the exit after the show, my phone began buzzing with notifications, friends and family members liking the photo and leaving supportive comments. My mother texted, "They look so happy. You're a wonderful father." Jason commented, "This beats unicorns any day, best dad." Even my coworker Darren chimed in, "Glad those tickets found the right home." The kids were half asleep by the time we reached the car, clutching their souvenirs, a detailed sketchbook of Disney architecture for Mason and a princess dress-up set for Emma. As I helped them buckle in, Mason mumbled through his exhaustion, "Dad, this was the best day ever." "Better than any party," Emma agreed, already drifting off. As they fell asleep in the back seat during the drive home, I reflected on what we'd experienced. The day had been more than just fun. It had been healing. For a few precious hours, the hurt of rejection had been replaced by the joy of acceptance and belonging. We had created our own magic on our own terms. The fallout began the next morning with a call from my parents. "We saw your Disney pictures," my mother said. "The children look absolutely wonderful. So much joy in their faces." It was a great day, I confirmed, keeping my voice down as Mason and Emma were still sleeping off their adventure. "We also saw Natalie's posts from Isabella's party," my father chimed in from the extension. "Very elaborate." "That's one word for it," I agreed. "Have you spoken to her since Mom asked cautiously?" "Not yet. I left early before the cake cutting. There was a situation." I filled them in on what had happened at the party, including Natalie's comments to her friends and our confrontation in the hallway. "Oh, Andre," my mother sighed. "I don't know where we went wrong with her. This level of elitism isn't what we taught either of you. You didn't go wrong, Mom. Natalie makes her own choices. Will you try to talk to her again? Dad asked. For the kid's sake. I will, but I'm going to let the dust settle first, and next time it'll be on my terms. After hanging up with my parents, I made banana pancakes for the kids who wandered into the kitchen around 10 o'clock, still wearing their souvenir Mickey ears from the night before. Can we go back to Disneyland today? Emma asked hopefully, through a mouthful of pancake. Not today, kiddo, but we'll definitely go again sometime. As we were cleaning up breakfast, my phone rang. Natalie's name on the screen sent a surge of anxiety through me, but I knew this conversation was inevitable. I need to take this, I told the kids. Why don't you start picking which photos from yesterday we should print for our family album? They headed to the living room with my camera while I answered the call. How could you? Natalie's voice was tight with anger. Taking them to Disneyland on the same day as Isabella's party, and then plastering it all over social media. Do you have any idea how that made us look? No hello, no preamble, just straight to the accusation. I took my children who had been deliberately excluded from a family celebration to do something special instead. I posted exactly one photo because it was a happy moment. How does that make you look? Like we're the villains in some family drama. Isabella saw your post this morning, and now she's upset that she missed going to Disney with her cousins. She's saying her party wasn't as fun. I bit back my initial response. I'm sorry Isabella is disappointed, but that was not my intention. Mason and Emma were devastated about being excluded from her party. I was trying to give them a positive experience instead. You could have done that any day. You specifically chose Isabella's party day to make a point. The tickets became available for that specific day, I explained, though I didn't owe her this justification. But yes, I wanted my kids to have something special to look forward to, instead of sitting at home feeling rejected by their family. This is exactly why Natalie began, then stopped herself. Why what? Why you didn't want them at the party? Because they're not perfect enough for your Instagram feed. That's unfair, she snapped. I was trying to create an appropriate atmosphere for the guests we had invited. For your guests, Natalie. Not for Isabella. She told me herself that she saved seats for Mason and Emma. She wanted them there. That seemed to give her pause. She's a child. She doesn't understand social dynamics. No, she understands perfectly. She understands that family should come before appearances. Maybe you could learn something from her. The conversation deteriorated from there, with Natalie accusing me of deliberately showing her up and ruining Isabella's special day by posting competing photos. I eventually ended the call when it became clear we were just talking in circles. 2 days later, Richard called, his tone surprisingly conciliatory. Look, Andre, things got out of hand, he began. Natalie's upset, but I think everyone needs to take a step back here. I agree, I said cautiously. Isabella's been asking when she can see Mason and Emma. She's talking non-stop about wanting to go to Disneyland with them. The party was beautiful, but, he sighed. I'm starting to think Natalie may have miscalculated on this one. It was the closest thing to an admission of fault I'd ever heard from Richard. The kids miss her too, I offered. They've always gotten along well when given the chance. That's what I've been telling Natalie. Maybe we could arrange something, a day for just the cousins to spend time together. I'd be open to that, I agreed. But Richard, I need to be clear about something. I won't have my children treated as though they're not good enough ever again. They deserve respect even if their manners aren't always perfect, or their clothes aren't always designer brands. There was a pause before he responded. I understand. For what it's worth, I've always thought they were great kids. Lively but great. The following weekend, Isabella came to our house for an afternoon. It was the first time Natalie had allowed her to visit without her supervision, a small but significant shift. The 3 cousins disappeared into the backyard almost immediately, where they constructed an elaborate fort from sheets, lawn chairs, and clothespins. When Natalie came to pick Isabella up, she remained in the car, sending Richard to the door instead. But through the windshield, I could see her watching as Isabella hugged Mason and Emma goodbye, all 3 children reluctant to separate. The real breakthrough came 3 weeks later at my parents' anniversary dinner. They had flown in for the weekend and rented a private room at a restaurant insisting that both their children and all their grandchildren attend. It was the first time our entire family had been together since the party incident. The initial tension was palpable. Natalie arrived impeccably dressed as always, her expression carefully neutral as she air-kissed my cheek. But as the evening progressed, something unexpected happened. Isabella gravitated toward Mason and Emma, the three of them sharing inside jokes and giggles at their end of the table. During dessert, I overheard Isabella asking Natalie, "Mom, when can Mason and Emma sleep over? You said we could talk about it after Grandma and Grandpa's dinner." Natalie glanced at me, then back at her daughter. "We'll see, sweetie. Maybe sometime soon." Later, as the adults had coffee, Natalie approached me somewhat stiffly. "The children seem to have fun together," she observed, watching the three of them playing a hand-clapping game in the corner. "They always have," I replied. "They're family." She was quiet for a moment. I may have been excessive about the party. In retrospect, coming from Natalie, this qualified as a major apology. "We all make mistakes," I offered, extending an olive branch. Isabella hasn't stopped talking about going to Disneyland with her cousins. She smoothed her already perfect hair. Perhaps we could plan a trip together, all of us, when Richard can take some time off." It wasn't a complete reconciliation, and I knew we still had fundamentally different views on parenting and life values, but it was a start, an acknowledgement that family connections mattered more than perfect appearances. Over the following months, there were small but meaningful changes. Isabella visited more often. Natalie made awkward but genuine efforts to engage with Mason and Emma, even attending Mason's art show at school. I made sure the children were on their best behavior during family gatherings, not to please Natalie, but to make these tentative new connections easier for everyone. The most profound change, however, wasn't in Natalie but in me. Standing up for my children had forced me to also stand up for myself and my values. I stopped seeking Natalie's approval or feeling inferior because our lives looked different. Instead, I embraced the beautiful chaos of our imperfect but loving family unit. 6 months after the party incident, we started a new tradition, monthly cousin adventure days, where the three children take turns choosing an activity. Sometimes it's as simple as a picnic in the park. Other times it's as elaborate as the science museum. Natalie and I take turns hosting, and while we'll never be best friends, we've found a way to peacefully coexist for the sake of the children who love each other. Mason and Emma have flourished with this renewed family connection. Mason's art has taken on brighter colors and hopeful themes, while Emma's natural confidence has found positive channels. Most importantly, they know that their worth isn't determined by someone else's narrow standards, that being true to themselves is more valuable than fitting into anyone's perfect picture. As for me, I've learned that standing up for what matters doesn't always mean grand gestures or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it's as simple as choosing joy over resentment, authenticity over approval, and love over appearances. In protecting my children's hearts, I found my own strength. Have you ever had to stand up for your children against family judgment, or found yourself choosing between keeping the peace and protecting someone's feelings? Share your experiences in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you navigated your own family dynamics. Don't forget to like this video. If it resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life stories, and hit that share button if you know someone who might need to hear this message today. Remember, family isn't about perfection. It's about acceptance, love, and the courage to choose what truly matters. Thank you for listening, and until next time, cherish the perfectly imperfect moments with the ones you love.